doing? Welcome back to Rob's high-tech color board of truth and justice. As you can tell, it's the Christmas special edition. So welcome. Today what we're going to be talking about is ICBC and the way in which they have set it up so that it would appear that we no longer have the rights that our parents and our grandparents did. Now, most people will believe that you need a driver's license in order to get out on the highway and engage in your common law right to travel. However, that's not the case. The fact is, there's no one in ICBC who's willing to claim that the common law right to travel no longer exists, and I'll tell you why. Anytime you get stopped on the highway, the police are going to be pointing to what they like to refer to as the Motor Vehicle Act. Now, depending on where you are, they might call it the Highway Traffic Act, Highway Safety Act, something along those lines, but they will point to a body of words. And they will claim that because of this body of words, you have certain duties. And these duties involve submitting an application for registration for your automobile, turning it into a motor vehicle, and that you must produce identification, license, and obey all the rules of the road and the Motor Vehicle Act. You must stop for them, and essentially you have to contract with this private entity called ICBC, which is the Insurance Corporation of British Columbia. Now, insurance has been identified, it's legally defined as a scheme. And it is a form of gambling. And we all know the house always makes their money when it comes to gambling, don't we? So the question is, does the MVA, does the Motor Vehicle Act, create an obligation upon us to do what these people want us to do? Or is it merely an invitation, which if accepted? Now the problem is, I know what the truth is. I've looked at it, and I'll explain to you why the Motor Vehicle Act simply doesn't affect previously existing rights. I'll tell you why. It's very simple. The previously existing rights aren't mentioned at all. There's a concept at law that says an act which has the intent or the purpose of affecting a previously existing right must do so clearly, specifically, and unequivocally. You can't not mention a right and then claim that an act removed that right because it wasn't mentioned. Otherwise, the Motor Vehicle Act would remove a whole slew of rights. For a right to be affected by a body of words such as the MVA, it must be mentioned. The Motor Vehicle Act must mention the previously existing common law right to travel in privately owned automobiles in order to claim that the Motor Vehicle Act, in order for them to claim that the Motor Vehicle Act affects it. If it's not mentioned clearly, specifically, and unequivocally, then it is not affected clearly, specifically, and unequivocally. Now the problem is, you talk to the people in ICBC, they know this. They know that they're merely a corporation engaging in a gambling scheme to extract money, and they will claim public safety, and they point that all they're doing is what the provincial government has told them to do. So it's the provincial government now that has the liability, because they're the ones directing ICBC, who then, what do? They, of course, go out and they hire cops with guns. And tasers. Big sticks. steel-toe boots. Now these cops with guns, tasers, big sticks, and steel-toe boots, they operate upon the assumption that the words created by the provincial government, this MVA, which empowers ICBC and which empowers ICBC to empower the cops, they operate like that body of words gives them a complete monopoly on the roads, and that they now have the right to stop us from exercising in previously existing rights. And if it wasn't for this MVA, they would have no power, no right whatsoever to bring forth anything against someone. So remove that. Are you doing anything unlawful? Clearly not. Now comes the time where does it say in the MVA that the previously existing right? And you might get off, but the cop still gets to arrest you and harass you. And if you take it into court, you know what the judge will say? These cops, they're operating with color of right. They're wrong, they're ignorant of the law, they're grossly negligent, but because ICBC never told them the limits of their authority, they have the right to operate in the manner that they do. And if you try taking it to ICBC, then you get a whole bunch of lawyers and you get a big runaround and try getting a straight answer from them. So the question is the head of ICBC willing to claim under oath and full commercial liability that the common law right to travel no longer exists? And if he is not willing to do that, does he not have a duty to inform these cops with guns, tasers, big sticks, and steel-toe boots as to the limits of their authority? I think he does. Now, let's look at the next bit here. Okay, we've seen what insurance is. It's a scheme. It's gambling. It's something that the house makes a lot of money at. And here's a little point in law. You cannot be obliged to engage in a gambling scheme. No one can force you to do that. It's a basic function of law. Look, it's like magic. And the people in the provincial government, they know this. Now, the C, I'm using the color one now. The C means they're a corporation. It's Insurance Corporation of British Columbia. Now here's the thing about corporations. They are obliged to act, they're limited in what they can do because acting as a corporation provides them with a certain level of protection and benefit. However, that benefit produces certain liabilities which limits them. If they want the benefits that acting as a corporation affords them, they must bear the burdens. And one of those burdens is that they are obliged to use contract. They can't claim that you have any obligation to them in the absence of a contract. Now, what about the people who never do what the MVA, the Motor Vehicle Act here, wants them to do? And that, of course, is submit an application and register their automobile so that it can be deemed a motor vehicle under that act. The provincial government has taken great steps, or the people in the provincial government, because all they are people using words. And these people, in their words, they've created the Motor Vehicle Act, which apparently empowers the Insurance Corporation of British Columbia to monitor or license the motor vehicles or the people who use our roads for their commercial benefit. And that's all fine and good. But now the problem is that ICBC, the people, have hired these people. And these cops don't know what the Motor Vehicle Act actually says and the limits upon it. They operate upon the assumption that that body of words empowers ICBC to empower them to stop us from exercising our rights unless we go and engage in the insurance scheme that is the Motor Vehicle Act and the insurance that they want to provide. Now, somewhere in this great big mess, somewhere between the provincial government, the Motor Vehicle Act, the Insurance Corporation of British Columbia, and the cops with their guns and tasers and big sticks and steel-toe boots, somewhere in there is liability, because in the end, these cops are in fact engaging in mischief and interfering in the lawful exercise of rights merely because we don't have the documents that evidences the contract with the Corporation of British Columbia, which would empower them to act as agents and enforce the Motor Vehicle Act against us. So who's liable? Is it the cops because they should know better? Is it ICBC because they should know better? Is it the provincial government for creating a body of words which is so clearly designed to be deceptive? Where's the liability? Personally, since liability, it's all about collecting money, and it's these people who have the money, I think it's up to the head of ICBC, the president and CEO, John Schubert. I think most of the liability rests upon him because he certainly has a duty to understand the limits of the mandate given to ICBC by the Motor Vehicle Act, and he certainly has the duty to inform his agents, the peace officers who are now hired to act as policy enforcement officers, about the limits of their authority. Now certainly they have a duty, the cops have a duty to understand the limits of this authority, and certainly the provincial government and the people in their words, they have a duty to craft less ambiguous and confusing words. But when you look at the whole thing, what I see is that ICBC is the one with the hot potato, the big duty. They have the big duty to understand the Motor Vehicle Act greater than the cops. They have a duty to limit the cops as they empower them. And when all is said and done, if these cops come and they use their guns, tasers, big sticks, and steel-toe boots in order to enforce a corporate policy upon those who are not in contract, then it's ICBC. It's the people in the top of ICBC who are going to face and taste the liability lash. That's what I see. No contract, no corporate association, no cops can come and enforce a corporate policy upon you, regardless of whether or not they are competent to interpret the Motor Vehicle Act, which they clearly are not. I challenge anyone to show me where in the Motor Vehicle Act the previously existing rights, the things that we could engage in if this act was not there, such as get on the road, privately owned automobile, no permit, no license, no insurance, and travel from point A to point B for non-commercial reasons. That right is still in existence. But these people with their gross negligence and incompetence, these people with their, well, I think it's probably greed. They just want to monopolize the entire road. Any idea how much money these people make off of it? You think the CEO isn't well paid? He's making hundreds of grand a year. And what about these people with their words? The provincial government, certainly they knew that their words in this Motor Vehicle Act were ambiguous and confusing enough that it would result in a situation where guns, tasers, big sticks, and steel-toe boots would be used against those merely exercising their common law rights. So unless I challenge anyone to show me where in the Motor Vehicle Act the previously existing right just mentioned was clearly, specifically, and unequivocally removed. Show me where it's even mentioned if you want to claim that it was affected. But if you can't even show me that right mentioned in that act, you have no right pointing to that act to justify using guns, tasers, big sticks, and steel-toe boots to stop me from exercising that right. So John, we're going to have a little chat. We're either going to do it in court, small claims, I'm going to bring a claim of liability to you, or we're going to engage in a nice little discussion. On camera. Likely share it with YouTube. Hi, how are you?
Good, how are you?
Your ICBC's what?
Media relations.
Media relations.
Yes.
Sweet, I'm at that stage. That must be so cool.
So, my colleague passed your inquiry. You said you wanted some information about travel rights?
Yes. Well, yeah, essentially, whether or not the Motor Vehicle Act mentions previously existing rights, and whether or not we have an obligation to engage in a contract with ICBC in order to exercise those previously existing rights, and what level, of course, of liability ICBC has if police officers who are acting as policy enforcement officers for that corporation enforce the policy in the absence of a contract using guns, tasers, big sticks, or their steel-toe boots upon people who are merely exercising previously existing rights. So that's essentially the focus of my work.
Okay. Okay. I'm just trying to get my head around this one.
I can help you. Check out thinkfree.ca or the World Freeman Society.
Okay. Okay. Well, I will look into this. And what's your deadline?
Well, if I don't make the issue for Wednesday, then I have to do the next one. So, but I would like to get it happening as soon as possible because we also incorporate video productions that go out online. If are you on the internet there? I imagine you are.
Yep.
You want to watch a quick little production of mine? It'll only take a few minutes, and you'll get a sense of what I do.
Maybe if you just give me the address, I'll go to it.
Okay, it's my YouTube account is Mr. Mighty, MRMITEE,
Yep.
and the video short is Dealing with Police.
Okay.
And you might enjoy it over lunch. I used to do stand-up comedy, so I was trying to be kind of funny, right?
Okay. Do you have an email address?
Yes, Freeman Menard,
Okay. Can you spell that for me?
FREEMAN
Yep. Yep.
MENARD
Yep. Perfect.
Gmail.
Okay. Perfect. I'll get back to you as soon as possible.
And what was your name again?
Lindsay Olson.
Lindsay Olson?
Yep.
Thank you, Lindsay. Have a great day.
You too.
Bye.
Bye.
One of the Olsen twins just phoned me. Maybe not. Well, I received a reply from Lindsay Olsen. Unfortunately, it wasn't by phone call, it was by email. And what did she do? Surprise, surprise. She told me that John Schubert, the head of ICBC, is not qualified to share his opinion or his beliefs or his knowledge of his mandate, and that I should talk to the provincial government. So what you're going to see, I'll talk to the provincial government, and you know what they'll say? They'll say you have to talk to ICBC. I talk to the cops, they'll say take it up with the government. So what you end up having essentially are three people, three parties, playing keep away with our rights. Kind of like kids in grade school used to do to me. Well, I was in high school, they were in grade school, but they'd take my hat and pass it around and wouldn't let me have it. It was very embarrassing. But that's essentially what she's trying to do. So we're going to give her a shout and we're going to see what she has to say about that. And I'm going to question her as to why she believes that the provincial government is the one qualified to tell me what John Schubert's opinions are. Because if that's where he's getting his opinion, I want his opinion. I want to know whether or not he is accepted his duty to inform his agents as to the limits of their authority, or whether or not he is purposely allowing this deception and this gross negligence to continue, because although he didn't create it, he's certainly benefiting from it now. Now I want to interview this guy on camera and talk to him, but he's just, he's shining me, and he's doing it through sweet Lindsay Olsen. So, you know, it's not like I live very far from the Lonsdale Quay or the head ICBC office. It's not like I can't engage in ambush journalism. So I'm going to call her and see whether or not that would be preferable. Hello?
Menard, please.
Speaking.
Hi, Mr. Menard. It's Christine Barrett. I'm calling for customer relations at ICBC.
Hi, Christine. How are you?
I'm good. How are you doing?
I'm fantastic. What a beautiful day it is today, isn't it?
It's a gorgeous day. I just was calling because you had called yesterday in regards to asking if Mr. Schubert would like to do an interview?
Yes, I'm very interested in getting his perspective concerning what some people feel is a fairly contentious issue and doing it in a manner that, I don't want to be like an ambush journalist or anything like that. I don't want to present, anyone in a bad light. I think honestly, most people do the best they can with the information they have available to them and their ability to process it. I don't know the man. Chances are he's as decent a human being as anyone. But there are certain concerns that have to be addressed. And telling me that I should go talk to the provincial government, when I go talk to them and they say that they're not qualified to speak to what the president of ICBC believes, so it's...
Okay, well, Mr. Schubert's not interested in doing an interview with you.
He's not?
So, no.
Is he interested at all in answering to the public's concerns that he's operating outside of his mandate?
No, he's not interested in having an interview. That's all I can say.
My next course of action then, unfortunately, would be to file documents in court in order to find the truth to these matters, and I don't know that that would really be in his best interest.
Well, you do whatever you need to do, but he's not interested in doing an interview with you.
Would he be interested in doing an interview with someone else concerning these issues if he doesn't like me personally?
No, it's nothing personal. He just does not want to do an interview at this time.
Okay, well, then I guess we'll see what we'll have to see.
Okay.
But thank you very much.
Okay.
See you on YouTube.
Okay.
Bye. He doesn't want to do an interview at this time. Of course, criminals who are caught acting in criminal fashions generally do not want to be interviewed at this time. Now, I'm not saying this man is a criminal. He might be a very decent man, a very loving man. But I did notice something disturbing when I looked at his picture. ICBC was being operated by Peter Griffith. So I called the Solicitor General, Cash Heed.
Something I may help you with?
Well, I'm wondering if ICBC falls under her mandate, I guess. If not, then
No, it actually doesn't. It falls under the Ministry of Public Safety and Solicitor General, which is Minister Cash Heed.
Cool. And Cash
Want me to
Heed...
transfer you over to them?
Sure. Do you have his number first?
Yeah. It is 250
Yeah.
356
356
7717.
7717. And he used to be a police officer, right?
Yes, he did. I think he was with West Vancouver Police.
Kind of a cool name, eh? Cash Heed. If you switch those two letters around.
That would be... Oh, yeah. Would you like me to transfer you over to his office?
Yes, thank you very much.
One moment.
Well, as an ex-police officer, he would have very little excuse for not knowing if the laws...
Deputy's office, Kathy speaking.
Hello, I'm looking for Cash Heed.
He's in a meeting. Can I have him return your call?
Sure. My name's Rob.
And where are you calling from, Rob?
Vancouver. Lovely, beautiful Vancouver. How's the weather over there?
Sorry?
How's the weather over there?
Good.
Sweet.
Does he know what the call's about?
I don't know. It depends on the level of his psychic abilities.
Okay.
I'm just playing no, likely he doesn't, but it's concerning ICBC and their mandate.
Okay. Great. And are you a member of the public?
Well, I don't know exactly what that means, but I'm writing an article for a newspaper, so...
Are you a government employee?
No, certainly not. Are you?
You're writing an article for which newspaper?
The Agora.
Sorry?
The National, the Agora National.
The Agora National.
Yeah.
Is that AGORA?
Correct.
Okay, great, thank you.
Any idea when he might call me back?
I'm not sure.
Would it be possible to ask him to call me back tomorrow? Because I'm going to be stepping away from the phone this afternoon, but I will be available tomorrow.
Okay, I will.
Thank you very much. You have a fantastic day.
You too. Thank
Bye.
you. Bye.
So I had a nice chat with a man from the Solicitor General's office, an assistant for Cash Heed. And although the recording wasn't very good because I was on my cell phone when I received the call, and the recorder, it also picks up a lot of interference. So I don't have much of a recording of that, but he did direct me to write down my concerns. He probably wanted me to write them down on a piece of paper and mail it in to him directly instead of using what I'm going to use, which is the high-tech color board of truth and justice. So I'm going to write my concerns down on that, include it in my video, and send them a link to my YouTube. So everyone, Cash Heed, the Solicitor General of the province of British Columbia, and other people who are concerned and affected by this issue, can all be on the same page or the same board. So that's what I'm going to do. I'll explain to you what my concerns are. So, hi Cash Heed, you should be watching this. Now, in order to understand what's really on my mind and what my concern is, we really have to look a little bit at the history. There was a time prior to the creation of the Motor Vehicle Act where people could in fact get out on the highway and travel from point A to point B. And provided they were not engaging in commerce on the highway, they had the right to do that. We shall call that the right to travel. Now, however, if you try exercising this right, you get out on the highway in a privately owned unregistered automobile, and if you don't have a license plate on it issued with the stamp and everything, what do you have happening? You have the men in blue who will come and they will, in fact, stop you from exercising this right. And they will do so by pointing to, let's go this way, they will point to the Motor Vehicle Act here in BC. In other jurisdictions, you might call it the Highway Safety Act, the Highway Traffic Act, something along that lines, but they all point to this body of words. And they claim that this body of words justifies them stopping you from doing what you're doing and to place demands upon you, demanding that you produce identification, driver's license, registration, and insurance. Now, the effect is that the right to travel has been removed by the Motor Vehicle Act. That's pretty much undeniable. But has it in fact been removed? What if it hasn't been? And what if the people who made this act, who authored this act, were relying on their ambiguity and deception and the ignorance of the police to create a situation where the right to travel has been removed and denied us? Now, they're kind of tricky with the MVA and what they do. They say that the Motor Vehicle Act is applicable to, of course, motor vehicles. But is there a difference between a motor vehicle and an automobile? Are they both one and the same or not? Now, the other issue here, this is what it fundamentally boils down to. And when you try to get these people that are involved in this, the police, ICBC, the Solicitor General's office, and the courts, when you try to nail them down on this, this is where they'll start dancing around. Does a motor vehicle equal an automobile? Are all automobiles motor vehicles? Now, you can say all apples are round red fruit. That does not necessarily mean all round red fruit are apples. If you look at the definition of Motor Vehicle Act, you will find that they do define something which could also be the definition of an automobile. But that doesn't mean they're equal, because the question is it a full and complete definition? If you look at the definition of accident, under the Motor Vehicle Act, the definition of accident it says includes an intentional collision. So the question is, if accident is not a full and complete definition, then how can they claim that the definition of motor vehicle in the Motor Vehicle Act is full and complete? It's not. And the other attribute, there is an attribute that separates a motor vehicle from an automobile. And that attribute is, in fact, that the owner has voluntarily registered. They have voluntarily registered their private property, and now it is a motor vehicle. They can use it to deliver pizzas if they want. They can use it to engage in commerce on the highway. They never had an obligation to do so, but now it is a motor vehicle. It is no longer legally considered merely to be a private automobile. So the question is, are we obliged to register? Again, if you look in the Motor Vehicle Act, you know what you find? You find that it states the owner must apply for and receive registration in the form required by ICBC. They tell you flat out you have to apply for it, and we know apply means to beg. And since you are never obliged to beg in a common law jurisdiction, this is entirely voluntary. So that's what I see so far. Bear in mind, this is just a little background information for you there, Mr. Kashid. We have no obligation to register our privately owned property with ICBC, and if we don't, you have no right to claim that it's a motor vehicle covered under the Motor Vehicle Act because we haven't registered it. That's what the Motor Vehicle Act says. So here's the big question that I have, which really angers me. Well, it doesn't really anger me, but I don't like it when I try to get answers for this and people who should know better, who have a duty to know better, give me a runaround. There's a concept in law. If an act, such as the Motor Vehicle Act, has the intent or effect of removing a previously existing right, like our right to travel, it must do so clearly, specifically, and unequivocally. It must mention the right. If it doesn't mention the right, it can't be deemed to affect it. Rights not mentioned are deemed unaffected. The Motor Vehicle Act does not mention the previously existing right. It creates no obligation whatsoever to register, but it does create in the mind of the police officers the duty that they can stop us for not doing so. The reason is that the Motor Vehicle Act was created by the politicians in the government. So we'll put Gov right here. Now, they created this Motor Vehicle Act. They could have used very unambiguous, very easily understood language, but they didn't, because then our rights would be very obvious. And they wouldn't have created for the police officers the color of right. Now, what they've done with this Motor Vehicle Act, they empower ICBC. And ICBC hires agents, policy enforcement officers, you know them as police. And if they catch you acting in contravention of the policies of ICBC as created by the government, they take you where? To court. where, because you are in contravention of ICBC's policies, you have to pay money to the government. Now, to avoid paying money to the government, you can just pay money right to ICBC, in which case they will then pay the police and pay the government. So it's their opinion that one way or another, you are going to pay merely to exercise your right to travel. And yet there's nothing in the Motor Vehicle Act which allows this. And if you try to get them to distinguish between a motor vehicle and an automobile, driving and traveling, they refuse to do this. Why? Because you have here essentially four groups. You have the people in the government, you have the people in ICBC, you have the people in the police, and you have the people in the courts. And they all work together to extract money from you. And then when you try going to any one of them, talking about your right to travel, you get what you witnessed with ICBC. They don't want to talk to you. Oh, go talk to the province. And the province will say, oh, you got to go talk to the courts or go talk to ICBC. Police will say, take it up with the judge, take it up with the government. And essentially what you have is four groups of people, all of whom getting very rich off of this little scam, playing keep away. And the simple fact is, if any single one of them were to accept and fulfill their duties, none of this would happen. ICBC, if the government didn't create a body of words like the Motor Vehicle Act, which was clearly designed to be deceptive, then ICBC wouldn't think that they had a mandate which empowered them to interfere with the common law right to travel. Police officers wouldn't be interfering with the common law right to travel because they would know if ICBC told them what the limits of their authority was, which they haven't done. But if ICBC did tell them this, then they wouldn't be coming and interfering with that common law right to travel. Take it up to the courts. But hey, in the courts, the moment you accept the court services, you have essentially subjected yourself to the jurisdiction of the government. And at that point, if you're going against them based on the charges they bring you under the policy of ICBC, instead of questioning the jurisdiction, they assume that you are automatically operating under the Motor Vehicle Act and your common law right to travel has nothing to do with it. So why doesn't one of these groups of people simply do their duty? It's because they're making so much money off of it. It's an insane amount of money that they're making. It's a big scam. So that's what I want to know about. That's one of my concerns right there, is my common law right to travel and how the government, ICBC, the police, and the courts all seem to be acting in collusion and conspiracy to deny what clearly is still in existence, the right to travel. You try asking the police if they distinguish between a motor vehicle and an automobile, or a driver and a traveler, and they are either incapable or unwilling to do that. Now, you wouldn't give someone a gun without teaching them how to use it properly. So why do we empower the police with the Motor Vehicle Act when they are incapable of distinguishing between a driver and a traveler, an automobile, and a motor vehicle? They shouldn't be enforcing that at all if they can't understand the limits of their mandate. Some of them can't even understand that there are limits to their mandate. And that brings me to another point. This is my big concern there, Kashid, as the Solicitor General of all these police officers. Let me share with you what my concern is. Here's what one of my main concerns are. Now, these police officers, there's a thing, certain legislation which the government has enacted. They're very proud of it. It's the proceeds of crime. If someone has been engaged in crime, the government or the people can come in and seize their assets, their property. So let's see what is a crime. Now, I'm pretty sure fraud is a crime. I'm pretty sure gross negligence is equal to fraud. And when police officers fail to distinguish between a statute and a law, or the law, a motor vehicle and an automobile, a traveler and a driver, when they fail to make these vital distinctions, they fail to maintain their mandate and they start operating outside their mandate. And that is the gross negligence. They end up committing mischief, extortion, and perversion of justice. In short, they end up spending their career, their entire career, committing crime. And everything they've ever been paid, all of their payment, everything they own, could arguably be deemed proceeds of crime. Any police officer who has ever been paid to tell someone either produce identification or you're going to be charged with obstruction of a peace officer is in fact guilty of perversion of justice. He's committed the crime. He got paid. That's proceeds of crime. Anyone who stopped an unregistered automobile and claimed that they had a right to do so because the Motor Vehicle Act restricts the use of the roads to only those who have registered their automobile with ICBC, well, if they can't point out the section of the Act which removed the previously existing right, that's gross negligence. It's equal to fraud. It's a crime. Everything they've been paid, their entire career, everything they've been paid is all proceeds of crime. And we, the people, have the right to take it away from them. Of course, the existing courts would never do that because they're in on the scam. Those courts are merely operated by people, and those people are getting very, very rich, along with the lawyers, the government, and the people in ICBC. Now, I'm sure you can all fool yourself and you can claim you're doing it to protect the public. But if that's the case, why do you people need so much deception? Why is there such a runaround when we try to find the truth? Why is it you're essentially playing keep away with my rights? And you're doing so with guns, with sticks, with pepper spray and handcuffs and a will to kill because we're not in contract with ICBC. Has to be a change there, Cash. There has to be a serious and very rapid change. You have an obligation to those peace officers and to the police or to the public to ensure that the police officers understand there are limits to their mandate. And if you have not gone on record publicly telling them and telling the public that the Motor Vehicle Act does not affect the previously existing rights, then you, sir, are a criminal and you're in cahoots. Now, my other concern has to do with Section 39 of the Criminal Code of Canada and how it mentions a claim of right. Now, as you must know, Section 39 expresses that property which is held under a claim of right can be defended using whatever level of force is necessary, provided of course, we don't seek to harm, even against those who might feel that they have a lawful right to that property. Now, let's take that into the context of a private automobile held under a claim of right on the highway. You have your little car. Do. Okay, it's apparently a Camino, an El Camino. You're traveling and a cop comes and he stops you. He comes out and he tries to seize your car. You tell him it's under a claim of right and you have the right to defend it using whatever force is necessary. You do realize that this is a guaranteed recipe for a violent disaster. And it will happen not because this man who's holding his property under a claim of right is wrong, but because the police officer see, that's his lights. Because the police officer is ignorant and grossly negligent, and because you, Kashid, will have failed to inform him of the limits of his mandate, and you will have failed to tell these peace officers that this man is not engaging in any unlawful activity, and he is simply not operating under the mandate or the umbrella of the Motor Vehicle Act. Now, I know why you don't want to do that, because then you're going to have to explain to all of these peace officers why the hell they've been doing it for the last 20 years. The fact that they have been pawns and patsies to your little scheme is going to become rather apparent. Yeah, in a situation like that, privately owned automobile held under a claim of right, the police officer tries pulling you over and claiming that they're going to confiscate, seize, or impound that motor vehicle. That's what they'll call it. Of course, we know it's not a motor vehicle, but we also know the cop is grossly negligent. What happens if this guy, the cop, pulls out a gun and says, listen, I'm going to use my gun, my pepper spray, my taser on you if you don't get out? And what if this guy has a gun? What then, Cash? I'll tell you what happens then. Tragedy happens then. And it's easily avoided if you act in an honorable manner and simply explain to the cops and to the public that the Motor Vehicle Act has nothing whatsoever to do with unregistered or deregistered automobiles. Are you going to do that, Cash? Because I've got a plan. I've got a course of action laid out. It's entirely lawful, and it will bring this information to light. And if you don't do it and I have to do it, then I'm going to claim that you people are involved in a criminal enterprise. And I'm going to start, well, I've got a plan. It's far better for you if you tell the public the truth. Okay, so continuing on here, Mr. Kashid and all internet viewers. What we have essentially is 4 entities all playing keep away. And to me, it seems an awful lot like I'm in the schoolyard and 4 bullies have got my hat and they're passing it back and forth. And they want me to say, oh, the other one's got it. They love it when you go running around. So the government has created this body of words, the Motor Vehicle Act, empowering ICBC to hire cops to act as agents to enforce that Motor Vehicle Act upon you and to bring you to the courts if you fail to follow the policies of ICBC according to the cops' interpretation of the Motor Vehicle Act. Now that Motor Vehicle Act is so twisted in its complexity and ambiguity that the cops develop what is called a color of right. So they avoid liability. The government, they avoid liability because they're not the ones enforcing it and bringing you to the courts. ICBC, they all claim that they don't have liability because it's not them enforcing it as well. And then the courts, well, they just enforce it as well against you because you're in there arguing about it. And for the most part, chances are if you haven't done your project, if you haven't established your rights properly, you will find that the courts will claim that the government does have the right over you to create this body of words and have these people enforce it and do the big runaround. And if you tried raising the fact that you were just exercising your common law right to travel, chances are the court will in fact rule against you, and it will do so because of all of the green that is generated every time there is a transaction of some sort. And these courts, they are in fact operated, they're not magical wizards, they're just people. At the top of here, there's a human being. Up here, human being. That's you, Kashid, right there. I'm putting you right there. And then ICBC, there's a guy up there. That's John Schubert. He looks an awful lot like Peter Griffin. And up here, in charge of the RCMP or whatever police department you're dealing with, you've got 4 people, all of whom have a duty to us and our rights. And if any one of them were to fulfill their duty, this little scam they've got going would crumble. But it's not crumbling, and that's because none of these 4 people are doing their duties. Now there's remedy. What is that remedy? It's very simple. What we need is a judicial review. Of the entire process. However, the problem is justice demands that a party, someone who is subject or is affected by the outcome of an action, cannot be a judge of that action. And since what we're looking at is a judicial review of how the courts themselves operate, those courts are not suitable for that judicial review. So what that means is that the people need to convene new courts. Unless one of these people stand up and do their job and express that the Motor Vehicle Act does not interfere, does not affect previously existing rights, and unless these cops, the guys with the guns, stop trying to, this is the big movement right here, stop trying to bring us into the courts for merely exercising our rights, unless one of them do that, then the argument is that all 4 of them are engaged in a conspiracy. And therefore, the courts cannot be a party of the judicial review, so new courts need to be convened. And remember how when I mentioned about the proceeds of crime, these new courts, they would also have the right and the power to go after these people here and remove all of their property for the fact that they have been engaging in criminal activities and getting paid a lot of money for it. And I think it would be fair and just at that point, if it is necessary, to remove all their property, take it and give it back to the people. Yeah, I'm pretty sure all of these people at the top, the money they're being paid, a proper judicial review, not using the existing courts because they're a party to this review, a proper court would find that all of these people are liable, have been engaging in unlawful activities, and the money that they've been paid, properly called proceeds of crime. How do you like me now, Kashid? I'm willing to bet John Schubert doesn't like me much either.